Hi, welcome to Mark's Motivational Podcast. You're very welcome along this evening. I'm delighted to be joined by another guest tonight. Her name is Lily. She's wrote a great book. I just got my hands on it today. It's called Broadsider: The Siege of the. You might fill me in, Lily. What's the full title of the book again?
The Siege of the Behemoths.
Behemoths. Oh, very good. Yeah, I struggle with them long words. Sorry.
It's
But,
sorry, a lot of people struggle with
yeah,
some fictional terms that us
yeah,
authors
yeah,
have to come up
yeah.
with.
But you're very welcome along tonight, Lily.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And a bit of background. When did you write this book?
I wrote it last year. I finished it kind of at the start of lockdown.
Hmm.
Over the course of the first lockdown, I spent quite a lot of time with family.
Hmm.
And when I returned back to work after the first lockdown was over, I kind of felt that um, this year I didn't really do anything, you know,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I really wanted to use whatever time I had to really achieve something for the end of this year, before the end of the year.
Hmm.
So I picked up the manuscript for Broadsider again after I hadn't touched it for a while, and I said, I really should release this. It felt like it was right, it felt
Hmm.
like it was polished,
Yeah.
and I felt it was ready to put out there because I actually hadn't finished a book and felt that it was ready to go
Hmm.
until I finished Broadsider. So I felt like it was the right one and that it was the right time
Yeah.
because especially for a lot of people, like especially people like myself who are fans of science fiction, we've all been sitting at home reading or using our time creatively to consume sci-fi the way us nerds do. And
Yeah.
the problem is that there's not much sci-fi, new sci-fi out there at the moment, particularly uh, on television or Netflix or anything like that for us to consume. So I felt it was a good time to put it out and a good time for science fiction fans to get their hands on something new.
Brilliant, brilliant. Because I just see your influence a bit is Philip K. Dick. I've actually read his book before. I think it's really good. The Minority Report, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember reading that book when I was in secondary school, and I thought
Yeah.
it was a really good. I thought it well. I mean, it's an incredibly interesting premise, the concept of thought policing.
Hmm.
So I kind of feel like now at the moment, with how social media is going, a lot of us are being monitored by what we do and talk about by
Yeah.
private companies and corporations that provide us with social media services. So I kind of wanted to create a premise of a world where everyone can see each other's information
Mm.
in an honest capacity. Like, what's the natural next step of sharing a lot of our private things through social networking? So I wanted to introduce that as a question in the book.
Yeah, very good, very good. And how did you structure the book? Am I pronouncing your name right, Lily or Lydiat? Is it?
Uh, yeah, everyone calls me Lily.
Lily, that's
In
okay.
uh,
Yeah,
like it's funny because my name is Lilith Antoinette, but it's a
okay.
very long name,
Yeah,
and especially when I have to introduce myself to people, I could be shy, so I just say that my name is Lily, so they'll have
yeah,
to
perfect.
ask me if they're pronouncing it right.
Yeah, yeah. Because
So
I couldn't get the name of your book there, like the pronunciation of your book. So
yeah, I'm a fan of big, complicated
yeah,
words. Funnily enough, but
yeah, okay.
the the main thing about, I guess about the book, the way it's kind of structured is, well, I'm also a huge fan of Spielberg's older films
Yeah,
and some classic sci-fi stuff. So I really wanted to, I well, I really wanted to make an Indiana Jones and space book, and
that sounds
I
brilliant.
spent I spent a really long time writing something like that, like a spaghetti western in space. The problem is that it's already been done before, and that's Star Wars. So when I finished writing the first story that I really wanted to publish, I realized it just wasn't good enough and it needed to be rewritten. So I wanted to strip it back and do something a little bit more character focused instead
Hmm.
of a an action adventure per se, so I wanted to do space opera instead. So I structured it around the central character, and I really wanted to keep it as close to over her shoulder as possible without it being told from a first person perspective, because I find if you are telling a story from a first person's perspective, that works for things like biographies or YA novels where you really want to get into the head of the person who's talking. But I don't think that works for science fiction, because science fiction requires such a broad scope. You really need to be able to see a lot more. So I find close third person was the best way to structure the book. So I wanted to write it that way. I think I did a good way of writing it. And obviously there's a few psychological elements in the story where characters are literally delving into their own minds and thought processes in metaphorical ways. So I wanted to be able to kind of zoom out every now and again to show more of the universe as it's going forward in the
Very
narrative.
clever. Very clever. Yeah, like that's very, very clever. And I'm interested in getting the book. And did you self-publish this, or did you get a publisher yourself?
Well, I shopped it around as much as I could, and
Mm,
funnily enough, the three the because I wanted to get agents instead of approaching small publishing houses first,
mm,
and the two agent queries that went kind of up towards the end, it just didn't kind of work out. It just didn't feel right for the book. I really wanted to kind of I wanted it to be accessible, and I wanted it to remain in my hands,
yeah,
particularly for intellectual property reasons,
brilliant. Yeah.
because I not that I think anything in the book is majorly original, because you can only do so many things with science fiction,
Hmm.
but I feel like there's a lot in the book that I would like to maybe expand on further in different stories. So I wanted to really hold on to the intellectual property of the book, and that's why I decided to hold on and keep it as a self-published novel for now, before maybe expanding into other novels in the future and maybe putting them for a wider release with a publishing house.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea to keep your options open, so to speak. Yeah.
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
one of the major things with writing your stories and shopping them around is that you're going to face quite a lot of rejection. And
Hmm.
I find for anybody who's looking to publish their first book, and maybe they wrote it as a part-time thing or as their hobby and they just want to get it out there,
Hmm.
self-publishing is a big step on its own, to just
Hmm.
learn about how publishing works, printing costs, paper types,
Hmm.
all of that kind of stuff, particularly in formatting work for publishing. I think it's a really good exercise to do on your own, especially if it's your first novel, before you go and you make something that you think may top your first novel. Maybe that's the book you might want to shop around.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to self-publish this book, because I really wanted the experience of self-publishing, to really know the ins and outs of it.
That's a brilliant excuse. So to actually self-publish, that's a great advice for people who have written their first book. Because I've done the same. I self-published mine on Amazon, so
Mm,
I'm the same stage as
yeah.
you as well. But what motivates you, Lily, to write this book? Did anything motivate you to get this book off the ground, or is something you've always obviously science fiction has always been something you've been interested in? But how did you motivate yourself to keep going to finish the book?
I'll tell you what it is. There's actually two defining things. One of which was um, myself and my partner. We both work full time, right?
Yeah,
And my partner ended up taking on going ahead and studying for her bar exams,
yeah.
and going to really go for her law degree so she could become a barrister, and or even join a practice or something like that. So very smart person, right?
Yeah.
Crazy smart. And she spent a lot of her time studying, and I was kind of sitting around feeling like I'm actually not doing much right now, because I was just working full time. I was fresh out of my degree, which
Mm,
was in art and design and fine art.
mm,
So I always wanted to make something, like I wanted to design and conceptually create my own world, my own characters and stuff like that,
mm,
because I was always so into science fiction. So that was one big thing, because she was doing something big that consumed a lot of her time. So I
mm,
wanted to use my time to do something big as well, so I could have something to show for the amount of work that I've put in
Yeah.
with the amount of work she's put in, because she works hard all the time. And
Mhm.
I guess it was just something that kind of pushed me forward, was the efforts that I see her put in all the time.
Yeah.
And another thing that really pushed it was I had no, not that I didn't have, but I didn't have science fiction that I liked kind
Mm.
of out there.
Mm.
I feel like I know exactly what kind of sci-fi I like, which is space science fiction, spaceships, and characters, people, stories about people set to these fantastic space backdrops. And I really feel like there's a decline in that kind of media right now.
Mm.
We've all seen the most recent, renditions of what Star Wars has become. A
Yeah.
lot of people feel like the golden age of Star Trek is over,
Mm.
and there hasn't been a reboot of Battlestar Galactica since 2007. So there's quite a lot of sci-fi spaceship character media out there that is new, but just isn't what the older stuff was. So I wanted to write something that I felt fit my what I wanted to read. I wanted to write something that I wanted to read, because I feel
Right.
like myself and a lot of other readers didn't have what they wanted to read or see at the moment. So that was the main thing as well. I wanted to write something that I could pick up and go, that's really cool.
Brilliant, brilliant. Because it sounds great. Like their book sounds. I have to get my hands on a copy of it. Like, where can people get the book, Lily? Where can people pick up the book?
At the moment, you can pick it up on Amazon. You can get it
Okay.
on Kindle, and if you are part of the Kindle subscription service, you're actually able to get it free on their partner program. So
Okay.
you'll be able to read it for free if you have that. You're
Mm.
able to pick up the paperback copy for just €10,
Mm.
and obviously shipping as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, so you can get it on Amazon. And for anybody actually on the west of Ireland, if they're making a trip to Galway anytime soon,
Mm.
my local game store, uh, Dungeons and Donuts,
Mm.
which is just off of Shop Street in Galway, they're actually stocking copies of it for me as well.
Brilliant. That's great.
Uh, because the owners of Dungeons and Donuts have always been a huge supporter of my artwork and my stories
Right.
and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So when they found out I was writing a book, they offered to stock it on shelves for me. So if you wanted to pick it up on shelves, you can get it there as well.
That's great. That's great. I love the way like you've got your options open because you've got a degree in art and then you've got your writing. I think it's. Do you feel that it's good idea to have a different spectrum of stuff that you're good at? So like you can kind of like you kind of control your hands to different types of stuff. I think that's a really good idea. Do you think so, Lily?
I think it's great to have your finger in more than one pie,
Yeah.
especially when it comes down to if you want to work independently, if you want to be self-employed,
Mm.
which is what I hope to be
Yeah.
as I go forward as a writer and as an artist. You
Right.
have to you have to establish sets of revenue streams,
Mm-hmm.
and revenue streams just means branching out and being able to provide products or services
Yeah.
in different places, so that each of those revenue streams, though they might not be big for individual things, they all lead into the same river, and that
Yeah.
river is your success as a creator.
Mm.
So the thing about being able to write, for me, because I never thought I was a good writer. I did okay in English when I was in secondary school. I didn't want to study English or creative writing. I didn't want to do script or anything like that when I went to
Yeah.
college. I thought about doing film, but it just never worked out. I just wanted to do art because I felt like the best way I could express myself at the time was visually.
Mm.
And now I know there aren't certain things you can convey. Well, at least I know there are certain things that I can't convey visually, and but I can do with my words. So I really, if I can't draw it, if I can't paint it, then I can write it. And if I can't, let's say if I can't write it, then I'll draw it and see if I can express it that way.
Mm. That's great. Yeah, that's great because yeah, I loved your cover art of your cover as well. You know that you've got a degree in art because I love the way you've created the cover for your book. Did you do that? What did you use? Was that like was what way did you create that cover?
Funnily enough, the cover that ended up being used for the book wasn't the original one I had designed.
Okay.
But the main thing about the book was, see, I don't, I am terrible Okay, I am terrible with color. So I've always worked in black and white. When I was in college, I mainly studied print. I did quite a lot of comic book drawing work,
Mm,
and I worked with copper and zinc plates that we etched in acid to print, like high relief images.
mm,
So doing that in college, I was always on black and white, but I knew I couldn't use a black and white cover for my book. So I had this basic idea of a shape, and I was constantly looking at pictures of nebulas, uh, like these giant structures that are out there in space that encapsulate parts of our actual galaxy, and they're what makes up these giant plumes of gases and smokes and particles that are gorgeous to look at. And there's so many different types of them as well. A lot of them are named, and a lot of people have seen them. So I find a nebula is a very recognizable structure, but I needed one that was unique. So I drew up this basic idea of a what looks to be an outreaching hand or what looks to be a bird, depending on who looks at it. And I
yeah.
said I wanted that to go into a nebulous form. So I reached out to someone over the web, an artist that I worked with before, who did a couple of different graphic designs for me in color that I couldn't do. And basically I said to them, look, would you be able to render something like this? And they said, yeah, no problem. And that was great. So that's how I had the cover. And so the thing again about, having your fingers in a few different
Mhm.
streams,
Yeah.
it also means knowing people who can
Oh
help
yeah.
you out with
Big
something
thing.
that you can't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because let's say for yourself, Mark, you do podcasts. I would
Yeah.
not be able to sit and record a podcast. However,
Mm,
I would be able to sit and talk to someone about my book. So whereas I can't do a podcast about my own book, you can. And these kind of collaborations is what really
oh
keeps
yeah. Big time.
art going, especially
Yeah.
for creators in Ireland,
Yeah.
because now with the internet and social media, we can get out into a global
Mm,
sphere.
yeah.
And the more people you know, the more you're going to be able to succeed and keep going with the projects you're working on. And I think that's another great motivator, is knowing that there's other people out there working
Mm.
on projects just like you.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't set a bar. That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, because what like I was going to ask you as well. How long did it take you to write the book, Lily? How long did it take you?
I'd say it took me about a year, because
Yeah,
see, I always start my books really hard. So
yeah.
I
Mm,
normally I normally create a pipeline,
okay.
and that pipeline goes into a few different categories. So the first category takes a couple of weeks, and that's research and development. Just
Yeah.
researching a concept, especially with science fiction, you want to get your science right.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to make sure that some of my science worked.
Mm,
So I had to do research on different things. So any science that you kind of see in the book, I have read about. And trust me, okay, some of them are just head melting to read, specifically physics stuff.
God, yeah.
So you have to do research for a couple of weeks to make sure that all your stuff is kind of there, because you don't want to be bogged down in the middle of writing your manuscript about having to go and Google something and then read about it for 4 hours
Mm,
when you should have been writing. So that's the major thing. Have the research done. And if you do need to research something while you're in the middle of doing your manuscript, just make a note of it and keep writing.
brilliant. Yeah.
And so when I moved on to the stage of writing the first kind of draft, what I did was is that I wrote what's called a treatment. Um, Treatments are normally done for TV shows, where you basically bang out a concept in one or two A4 pages. So I did that. I kept all of the major story points for what I wanted to have. And then I returned to the treatment after a couple of weeks, after I've written all that down. And then I start dividing that up into chapters and story beats.
Very good.
So the main like the easiest way to write any novel is to use your three-act structure when you're working in a fictional form. So I divided mine up into a couple of chapters, and each 7 or 8 chapters was part of the three-act structure, first, second, and third. So
Mm,
once I was able to nail down all the story beats, after that it was just a matter of sitting down and banging it out, because the
mm,
research is done, the story is outlined, so you do not have to worry about structuring issues anymore.
brilliant.
And then after that, you just have to write it. And the major thing is to just keep writing.
Yeah.
Just keep
Yeah.
writing. Because if you don't keep writing, you'll never get to the next stage,
Yeah.
which is editing. And editing is the worst.
I know.
It's
I know.
very difficult. It is the hardest part of any book, because there is always going to be something wrong with what's on the page and you need to just find it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and after editing, then you give it to an editor, and then they're going to edit it for you as well. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
when you when you get it back from them, you give it to your critique partner, and then they're going to critique your book and tell you what they think is good or bad about it. And then finally, someone's going to read your book. And this is about a year and a half into the process for me.
mm,
That's when I was able to give it to beta readers, people who are not, well, not necessarily interested in the genre, but what you need is a broad spectrum of people who are
mm,
at different points in their life, who live in different places, and who are interested in different things. So you get a broad spectrum of people, you get them to read your book, you get their opinions on your book, and then you see what that reception to your work is, and then you get it ready for publishing, because now that it's edited, now that it's ready, and now you know how people are going to react to it from different demographics, then you can decide whether or not it's ready to go. And after all of that work, I realized I was coming to the end of my creative pipeline, which
mm.
was launching the book.
Yeah, and that's why you really, well, I really like you've really done your homework there. That's absolutely brilliant, Lily. Like to get all that behind you before you actually publish it, because that's giving you kind of a thumbs up, so to speak, isn't it? And I also love the way you're saying like that. You kind of didn't feel you were a great writer when you were in school, but you didn't like let that limiting belief stop you, like because a lot of people would get that limiting belief and say, God, I don't feel great at doing that, like, but fair play to you. You've stuck with it and you've published a book. So well done.
Oh, definitely. I feel like anybody at the moment who feels like they might not be good at something, I
Mm,
mean, if this year has shown us anything,
yeah,
it's shown us that if you feel like you're not good at something, now's
yeah,
the time to practice. Now's the time to
exactly.
reach out to your friends and say, hey, I have a new interest. I'm thinking of doing this. And you
Yeah,
know what? Don't even think about it, because everybody this year, because of the situation that we find ourselves, especially Irish people at the moment, we're
mm,
caught in this sense of we're kind of a bit scared about what the future looks like for
yeah,
us.
yeah,
And how is work going to go? How is finances going to go? How is our life going to go moving into next year? And when this pandemic is over, are we going to return to normal and stuff? So there's a lot of fear at the moment with
mm,
people and how they're going to go forward in the future. And I think now's the time to start something you always wanted to do. Make
yeah,
that your future. Make
mm-hmm,
that what you want to go forward with, and turn the 2020 we've had into a learning experience where you go forward and do something creative and figure out maybe you are a good writer, or maybe you're a great painter,
mm,
or whatever it is you want to
yeah,
get your hands dirty with. Go dive in and do it, and it's great. It's a
yeah,
really great experience. uh, Taking something that you've started and finishing it. There's nothing more exhilarating than finishing a project you've worked
brilliant.
on,
Yeah,
especially for a long time. So I
mm-hmm,
think, yeah, it's really great to look back at all the steps that you take, especially
mm,
when you structure out steps for yourself, dividing your work into smaller segments, so that you can say, well, I didn't just do one thing. I didn't just publish a book. I did 100 things leading up to publishing this book, and it's much more of an achievement when you break it down like that.
yeah. That's amazing. That's really, really good. Because a lot of people might look back at this year and say, "Oh my God, that was an awful year," But then, if you've done stuff that you've like the way you've published this book and that you've been working on so long, so that like that's a big achievement. You're like, God, that wasn't a waste year, because it's good to kind of as you say, try new things and put yourself out there, and try new things. So that's really good. I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast tonight.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, yeah. I might just ask you one or two questions before you go that I
Yeah,
ask most of the guests that come on, if that's okay.
absolutely.
Yeah. So since we're talking about books, do you have a favorite author or a favorite book?
Ooh, a favorite author or a favorite book?
Yeah.
It's
I
gonna
know
be
it's going to be
terrible.
science fiction, isn't it?
It
But
is gonna be sci-fi, but I'm gonna tell you right now that I can't pronounce his name. It's really bad.
now you're
Uh,
now you're in my court.
yeah, it's really bad because I always forget how to pronounce it properly. So I feel bad. Just a second. I just need to put in the name of his book so I
No
can
problem.
get his name. Oh, thank you. Okay, so my one of my favorite authors is Drew Karpyshyn.
Okay.
He's a Canadian writer, but he mostly actually works not just in novels, but he works in video game writing.
Okay.
So he wrote one of my favorite video game series called Mass Effect, which is a science fiction space opera,
Sounds
and
good.
it's a video game. And I didn't actually discover Mass Effect until I'm gonna say a couple of years ago, long after it actually came out. Mass Effect
Mm.
came out, I think, in 2002, 2003. It's a very old game. Uh, and so, yeah, not 2003. I think it's like 2007. And
Okay.
it's a great game, really great game. And I loved Drew Karpyshyn's world, his writing and stuff. So I straight away picked up his Mass Effect books that came as kind of companion pieces to the video games that he wrote on. And they were published by Orbit Publishing House. And I really, from then on, I was like, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to send it to Orbit and they're going to love it and they're going to get it out there. And one day I'm going to have my name next to Drew Karpyshyn
Yeah.
because his stories are really great.
I
And
must check it out.
yeah, and I feel like if any of my books could compare to something Drew Karpyshyn has done, I think that would be that. I think I would say I'd die happy, but I would be very happy about it.
Yeah. Well, that's a brilliant name for the
Yeah.
to orbit your book, like, orbit into space,
Yeah, absolutely. I think Orbit are really great for science fiction. They
Yeah.
have some good horror stuff as well.
Mm.
So yeah, that would be my favorite author, and I like anything that comes out of Orbit Publishing because
Yeah.
they do have some really great sci-fi content that comes
Mm.
out of their publishing house.
Yeah.
As for other like as for other things that I love listening, like let's say for music, I would sit down and listen to a lot of like I would what would I say? I listen to a lot of like ambient sound mixes,
Okay.
particularly like I don't know if you ever seen Blade Runner,
I did. Yeah, it's a
but
great film. Great film. Yeah. Yeah, I love that film.
yeah, so like
Yeah.
anything on the same lines as that kind of stuff from the
Mm.
80s. Any of
Yeah.
those kind of sounds that
Yeah.
come out of that time are really great to listen to. So I listen to stuff like that on
Yeah.
loop, especially when I'm
Brilliant.
writing, because it
Yeah.
gives me a sci-fi space to sit
Yeah.
into,
Brilliant.
you
Was
know.
Philip K. Dick? He wrote that, didn't he? I think, or was that
I
one of
you know
his books?
I actually forget, that I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
terrible because I've seen the
Yeah.
movie,
I
but
think. Yeah.
unfortunately
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
actually read the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like terrible.
Mm,
I'm
mm.
actually
No,
terrible.
no, no, because no, you're no, because no, just remember because I really enjoyed that book talking about sci-fi, the Philip K. Dick book. What was it? Minority Report was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah, like Minority Report, yeah, because I think just the concept of like mind hacking, you know what I
Mm,
mean, or
yeah,
or just like wow, it's just really really cool, and like
yeah,
being able to kind of think of I don't even know how to describe, but like the idea of thinking poorly being a crime, or
mm,
thinking about doing a crime is a crime, or not being honest is a crime.
yeah,
Things like that are really like they're questions that kind of challenge our humanity, and they challenge
yeah,
our empathy
yeah,
as people, because I think a lot of science fiction, I think the key to writing good science fiction, I think this is something for anyone, I always see science fiction as a question of technology and how it affects our empathy as people. Will technology stop us being empathetic to others, or will it aid us in being empathetic to others?
mm,
And that's really a question that I think any sci-fi book that works with sci-fi technology should really question and figure
yeah,
out. And,
mm,
and I think that's like a direct theme that anyone can take out of sci-fi is this technology good for people, or is this
mm,
technology bad for people? And if it
yeah,
is bad, in what way? And
mm,
because a lot of sci-fi can be a cautionary tale,
mm.
and the likes of those kind of things really influence what I write when I put stuff down to paper.
Very clever. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant, Lily. And moving on, do you have a favorite? You touched on the music aspect of things, but like favorite band or artist? What
Oh,
would you have a favorite?
I guess I've actually been listening to this is, I've been listening to a lot of Morrissey lately,
Oh, very good, very good. Like,
and
yeah,
and I
yeah,
personally don't like Morrissey as a person, but I do like his music. So
yeah. It sounds
I
very
don't
good.
I don't know. There's some really kind of I don't know, because like you can look at sci-fi as somebody who, you could be a nihilist who writes sci-fi, or you can be, you know, somebody with their head in the clouds who sees a perfect future and writes sci-fi. And I feel like there's a lot of that kind of stuff in the music that Morrissey kind of makes, especially in his voice. He's got a very interesting voice
He
to
has,
listen
yeah,
to,
yeah,
and
yeah.
there's a hint of nihilism. You know what I mean? I would like I don't know, the Smiths are just, they're just something else. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they present some very dire ideas, some negative ideas about how we feel as people, but that their music is also very happy, which is great because you're able to tell what
Yeah.
is overall a sad story through a
Mm.
happy medium,
Yeah.
which is the music they make. You know.
And a lot of their songs will be really strong metaphors as well. Like a lot of music use a lot of metaphors, as you know as well, Lily.
Yeah, definitely, and
Yeah,
I think metaphor is a great way to tell stories in general.
yeah, it is. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, because it's a
yeah.
great way to ask people questions that they may not normally ask themselves,
Mm-hmm.
particularly questions again around empathy and what would
Mm-hmm.
they do in a certain situation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things, let's say, around racism was challenged, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
in early Star Trek, because it made people think, you know, what would I do if I met this space alien who's very different to me? And it caused people at the time to think about their own predisposition to having
Yeah,
racist feelings about other humans, let alone other
yeah.
aliens. So like,
Mm.
it's metaphor is a really great way to tell stories, and
It is. Yeah.
I love high concept. So like,
Mm.
if you look at My Chemical Romance, which was, you know, they were a movement when they first came out in the 2000s, and when they
Yeah.
released their Black Parade album, that was such high concept stuff. And I
Mm.
think high concept albums that speak through metaphor, especially around things like, you know, death, life, religion, what do you believe in, and stuff like that,
Mm.
they really ask questions that get your mind thinking in creative
Yeah.
ways.
Mm.
Another high concept album that I love listening to is it's called it's called Wretched and Divine by this group called Black Veil Brides, who
Okay.
I would kind of see as the My Chemical Romance of the 2010s after My
Right.
Chemical Romance split up. And
Mm.
again, it's a high concept album that asks questions about, you know, what you do and how you believe in certain things, and it
Mm.
all tells it through these grand almost operatic tales, you know. And
Yeah.
yeah, stories like that, big stories, can actually make us think about the small things we do.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, yeah. That's great answer there. And like movies, do you have a favorite movies or a
Oh,
different
I
genre?
do.
Yeah.
I do. One of my favorite movies is, well, you can actually name any Star Trek film, but
Yeah.
I think Star Trek the motion picture
Mm.
is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And it's really strange because the film, when it first came out, flopped really
Mm.
badly. It was
Yeah.
meant to be a grand triumphant return of Star Trek because
Yeah. Remember
the
that? Yeah.
show
Yeah.
show had been cancelled so many years before it, and people were thinking, oh wow, William Shatner's coming back, and you know,
Yeah.
all of the cast is coming back, and they, you know, they were going to cancel the animated series and stuff, and
Mm.
people were thinking, what's this movie going to be about? And for the longest time, the movie was actually in a lot of danger because they went through so many different scripts, so
Yeah.
many different concepts, and I think the concept they inevitably landed on was incredible.
Mm.
And some of the visuals in that film are fantastic because most of them are actually done by hand. Most of
Wow.
early Star Trek is done using models
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
painted backgrounds, and very little of it is actually CG. A lot of
Mm.
it is actually a camera filming an actual effect
Yeah.
happening. So like,
Yeah.
so the effects they use for like the nebulas and
Mm.
stuff like that in Star Trek, they're actually, you know, mist being floated across water that has, you know, drops of color in it while it swirls
Wow.
around, you know, like things like that, like physical created things. And yeah, if you were to ever go back and watch a film in 4K Ultra HD with
Mm.
high dynamic range colors, Star Trek the Motion Picture is one of them. Now,
Yeah.
it's not a great watch because it's pretty boring. I'm not going to lie, it's pretty boring. But on a technical note, it is an
Mm.
incredible film to watch. And it's
Yeah.
any kind of Star Trek for me is a comfort. So
Mm.
I would have to say Star Trek in general is my favorite film and
Yeah.
TV show.
Yeah, it's actually gas. I remember watching Star Trek for years myself and remembering like you can't wait till they get back to Earth. Did you feel like that as well? You just couldn't wait till they actually got back to Earth again, like, you know?
Sometimes is when they first came out with Star Trek Voyager,
Yeah.
and I was thinking, where are they gonna go with this story? Because they've done so many different versions of Star Trek now, and it's
Yeah.
like there's not much left to explore, is there? Because
No.
by the end of Deep Space Nine,
Mm.
they the Federation and the Enterprise and everything, everyone's all friends now. Everyone's all buddy buddy, So like, what happens? And so in Star Trek Voyager, they actually launched them to the other side of the galaxy, and they're completely alone. And it really brought back that concept of the original Enterprise's 5-year
Mm.
mission in space,
Yeah.
and are they ever going to get back to Earth? And
Yeah.
I love that, because
Yeah.
in in what we're looking at now, with ending environmental disaster, the way
Mm.
corporations are out there and they're just sucking this planet that we live on dry, and
Mm.
economically, like, water is currently being traded on Wall Street.
Oh my
Stock
God.
in
Yeah.
water, a human right that we all deserve to have, is
Mm-hmm.
currently being traded financially. And when you look at the planet Earth as it is now, it's still a beautiful place despite
Yeah.
all of that. And
Yeah.
I think science fiction, that especially space sci-fi, that goes out of this world, that goes to other places in the universe,
Mm.
one of the major things about space sci-fi like that is that at the end of it, you do just want to go back to Earth. You want to go back to what's familiar.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't want it to be a dystopian Earth,
Mm.
you don't want it to be the Earth of the future, like in let's say Blade Runner, or like,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
want the Earth to turn out like that.
No.
You want it to be as it is, like we
Mm.
remember it and as we're living in it now.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
sci-fi, like with my own sci-fi stories, I mean, the Earth is all we have. No matter how far we go out into space, the Earth is
Mm-hmm.
our home, and we should really be taking care of it a lot more than we are now.
Yeah.
Not
Agree
that not that
100%.
I'm not a mad environmentalist,
I know.
so to
Yeah.
speak, but I do think the Earth plays a really pivotal role in how we look at sci-fi and how we appreciate it.
Yeah. That's pretty. Yeah. You're dead right. You're dead right. Um. Yeah. I was gonna ask you one other thing. Sorry. Yeah. So like, if you weren't doing what you're doing, if you weren't a writer, and if like, what other career would you like to do? Like, have you ever thought of any other career that you'd like to do than what you're doing, what you're doing now, Lily?
Well, my day job is a chef. I am a
Okay.
chef.
Wow. Yeah.
I love to cook. My
Mm.
dad taught me how to cook
Mm.
when I was going to college. When I was 17 years old, he was like, "You're gonna have to cook," so he
Yeah.
taught me how to cook, and I really liked it. And I worked as a barista going through college. And one day, I just went into a kitchen and I just realized, wow, I love it.
Mm.
I love cooking food. I think food is great. I specifically love cooking breakfast. It's the best meal of the day.
Yeah. I'm with you there.
Right, I'm telling you, because not that I'm an early riser or a
Mm.
morning person, but
Yeah.
I force myself to be,
Mm.
because I want to have a good breakfast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the creative process, as I nail it out for myself, the creative pipeline that I like to use for my work, it only works if I get up in the morning and I start
Mm.
early,
Yeah.
because there's some psychological slump about waking up later in the day, where you feel like, well, the day is nearly over,
Mm.
and it kind of stagnates your work. So I get up in the morning, I work on my creative processes, and then I get ready and I go to work. And I'm typically doing an evening shift, doing dinner service, and I love it as well. And I feel like at the end of the night, when I get home, I have had a full day.
Yeah. Yeah.
A
But
very full day,
mm.
because I never want to feel bored, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great, because like that's one of the podcasts I did before. Like, morning routines are so important. Like, to have a routine during the morning, like whatever it is, even writing
Yeah,
on a journal is very, very
yeah,
important. Like, so that's great, Lily. That's absolutely
absolutely.
brilliant. Yeah.
Set yourself some good habits.
Yeah.
Set yourself, like, I call them rituals. You
Yeah.
know what I
Very good.
mean?
Yeah.
Pick something that you like doing.
Mm.
If you
Yeah.
really like a particular type of coffee, right? Get it. Use
Yeah.
that to inspire yourself to get up in the morning. Look forward to that cup of coffee. Savor it, even if it's only for 5 minutes. I know it sounds like it's only a cup of coffee, but
Mm.
keeping that ritual, that routine,
Yeah.
really helps form the rest of your routine when it comes to your creative processes and getting yourself motivated.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Now, listen, I really appreciate you coming on tonight, Lily. And what's the name of your book again for everybody, please?
It's called Broadsider: The
Well,
Siege
so this,
of the Behemothus,
yeah,
and it's available now on Amazon. And if you're in Galway, you can pick it up in Dungeons and Donuts,
yeah.
just off of Shop Street.
Yeah, I was thinking of Dungeons and Dragons there when he said that for us. Is like,
Yeah, funnily enough, some of the characters from the book actually are from a Dungeons and Dragons
yeah.
campaign that I was putting together for myself
Oh,
and some friends. You
wow.
know, because I love Dungeons and Dragons. It's a really fun game, and funnily
Yeah,
enough, some of the best writers I know are people who actually play that game, and I know them through Dungeons and Donuts, which is
wow.
where I go to play board games and card games and stuff. It's a really fun space, and I feel like a lot of my creative processes were done through that shop, so I'm really
Yeah.
glad to have it in there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Like you can go and play board games and all that kind of stuff in the shop. That's really good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
really great space. They have this
yeah.
huge board game library,
Wow.
and you can rent a game for a fiver, and you get a cup of coffee and a really nice donut. By the
Yeah,
way, all the donuts are made there, and they're great.
yeah. I must
And
check
yeah,
that out the next time I go to Galway because I love going to Galway. Galway's a great place. I live in Dublin myself, so I love
of course.
venturing down, like you know. But
Oh yeah,
yeah,
Galway is great. Oh, the amount of people you meet in Galway. Creatively, it's the city to be in Ireland.
yeah, it's great. But what I'll do is I'll put your the name of your book in the show notes as well, Lily, so people can check it out and get your book. Yeah,
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And
yeah.
thanks for having me. This
Oh,
is
you're
my
great.
first time doing a
Yeah.
podcast.
Oh no, no, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But would you hope to kind of get someone to do a movie on your book as well? Just one last thing. Would you be hoping for that?
Oh wow. I think I think that's all, obviously a lot of authors' dreams these
Yeah,
days,
yeah,
especially since the adaptions of, J.K. Rowling's work
mm,
made Harry Potter so famous, and
yeah.
almost you see a lot of things these days, especially on Netflix and stuff, are based off of books.
Hmm.
So I think for any aspiring author, although it's a nice thing to hope for someone making a movie out of your book,
Hmm.
a major thing to hope for is just to hope that somebody reads the book.
Yeah, but
Hope that
that was
someone
the
reads
first.
your
That
book.
was the first thing when I yeah, but that was the first thing I thought of when I was reading your the short when the short thing you sent me earlier on. I was thinking, God, I can see this in the film because just reading it shortly a short time ago, just like I had a film wrote all over. You know, I think that's my personal opinion anyway.
Oh wow, thank you. Well,
Yeah,
I like to write scenes and stuff from a
yeah,
cinematic perspective. I
mm,
like giving people the ability to really visualize what
yeah,
they're reading,
great,
because
yeah,
I think books still have their place. I know we have streaming services now. We
yeah,
have blockbuster films that we can watch on our phones. I
yeah,
mean, YouTube is there. People can watch anything they want on so many different services. But I
yeah.
definitely think there's still a place for written media,
Oh, absolutely.
because there are certain things that film cannot do, and I think that's what books are great for.
Yeah, it's like your imagination's so strong. Like that's why it makes a book so much better because your imagination's
Absolutely.
so good. Like you know.
Absolutely. You don't need to engage as much
Mm,
with film in the way you engage with a book. A book is a
yeah,
very intimate thing, and it's really great for your creativity, and it's really great for your mental health.
yeah,
Being able to delve into a book, spread out your imagination and
mm,
build the
yeah.
things that you're reading about in your mind. It's a great mental
Oh, it's
exercise,
brilliant,
I
brilliant.
think.
Yeah, but listen, thanks a million, Lily, again for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Ah, thank you. Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah. What's your full name again, Lily? Sorry.
It's Lilith Antoinette. So if you're
Okay.
looking for the book, you can search me by Lilith Antoinette if you're
Brilliant.
brave enough to type all of that into your search browser.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, the best of luck with all your future endeavors, Lily, as well. You know.
And thank you, Mark. I'll be listening to the podcast going forward.
Thanks very much. Thank you.